Alrighty. Oh, hang on. Okay, good. I think is it the right mic? Yeah, it's the right mic. Sorry for your ears if that was. Oh, Blackbird. Hello. Let's go have a look at our Blackbird friend. Oh, actually, I don't have that set up. Never mind. All right. Yeah, no worries, no worries. Today I'm gonna be continuing to work on some just tidying up the last bits of some IO. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Some IO refactoring work that I've been doing. Yeah, I think I'm gonna. Let me bring up some relevant doodads and bits and pieces. So it's been a while since I specifically streamed some Winter's Wake stuff, but over the past few months, every now and again, I've brought up where I'm at with regards to this lovely to-do web. Is Genie my editor of choice? Not specifically. I don't like I don't like anything, right? Like I'm a grumpy old man. I don't like IDEs in general. Genie is. I used to just use gedit for everything, but they've changed a bunch of stuff about how it works that I just am not on board with. I'm using Z for some stuff, which is like a GTK2 fork of what used to be gedit, I think. I'm pretty sure it's GTK2 fork. But it's got some shortcomings I don't like. I switched to Genie just to get just to have an environment. Actually, there were a couple of reasons. One is that the way that gedit works is that it loads the entire file. In a way that means that if I need to open up or inspect something very big, it will be very, very slow, and it's color matching or color coding for single line files is abysmally slow as well, whereas Genie is a lot faster for that. And when it comes to looking at stuff like, say, the save files for HiveTime, which are just one line JSON, you know, Genie's definitely. We got one here that I can look at. We don't, but we can open one up. Yeah, it just makes it heaps easier. Let's just local share HiveTime saves. Let's just grab a random save. Yeah, it's like it's one thing. This doesn't do color coding on it for some reason. Oh, because it doesn't have a JSON extension. But it's way faster to edit and mess with. But there are a bunch of things I don't like about it. One is that if I select some text and then press Control F, it doesn't automatically stick that in the search buffer. If I search for something like we're gonna be. Oh, hang on, we're in file. Let's go back to Icicle main here because we're going to be needing to look for menu music. If I press Control G, it doesn't put focus back in the main editor window, so I can't just like Control F and then type what I want to look for, and then Control G and then continue and like work in the editor window. I've got to press Tab a billion times before I can get anything useful done. So there are like a couple of friction points like that. But it also has the ability to somewhere, yeah, it can parse symbols out of your files. It can read make files as like a project solution equivalent. So in that sense, it's sort of more compatible with my IDE agnostic way of doing things. So yeah, I don't mind working in it. I don't love working in it, but it's possible. Hello! Yeah, this is like half C, half C++, because I'm still... Yeah, I mean, like, I use Nano sometimes as well. Like, sometimes you just want to open a file, right? Sometimes you just want to open a file and write some letters. And yeah, Nano's fine for that, right? Yeah, also, hello and welcome. Yeah, yeah, particularly having control over build processes. But for me, also, I'm not a big fan of accelerators when it comes to programming work. And this is like runs contrary or counter to how a lot of people view development tools. But the reality is that for me, particularly when it comes to programming, which is like 90% of the work that I do when I'm programming is not typing, right? 90% of the work that I do is thinking, and I don't want to work faster than I can think. I find that the more accelerators I have, the less opportunity I have to think about what I'm doing while I'm doing it, and the more likely I am to land on something that is not as solid or robust a solution. And that's just me, I guess. You know, other people might work differently or feel differently. But yeah, I sort of strongly avoid accelerators when I can. The time that I spend typing out mindless stuff like getters and setters is time that I can spend thinking about useful and worthwhile things. If that sort of clarifies or adds any context to where I'm coming from there. So yeah, welcome Samsai, another Linux-based streamer, game developer person who also writes for Gaming on Linux. It's a couple of, at least I assume you still do. I feel real bad because it's been a long time since I've had time to like just stay on top of new stuff and keep track of what's going on and what's not going on. But yeah, a little bit of overlap between things that we do. Dragoiophenia is a a person who's helped a lot with testing and giving feedback on a lot of my games. Another Linux-based person who does some cool things. I realize now that I have never tried to pronounce your name, but AA Bill 11 is another person that hangs around a bit. Very welcome. Always happy to see you. Underflow Studios is Michael Brune, the lead developer of the Away team, a friend and collaborator that I'm happy to have around and on board. Abel, yeah, that's probably good enough. Yeah, so there was a question about or mentioned that got some C++ going on here. Icicle, the engine that Winter's Wake uses, is written in it's sort of half C, half C++. I got halfway through saying this before I got sidetracked myself. You know what, I'm gonna stick some Winter's Wake music on quietly in the background. This stuff was composed by Anton Riel, who is a long-time collaborator that I've been very happy to have worked with on this project and past projects, and hopefully future projects. But yeah, so originally I just wanted to write it in C because I figured that would make it a little bit more portable. I have these kind of vain dreams of someday being able to port this to the Amiga, and is that actually playing? No, it's not playing. Or it is playing. It's just very quiet. So okay, yeah, there we go. yeah, I was originally going to write in C, and I figured that the older the language I use, and the older the language standard that I use, the easier it's going to be able to find legacy compilers to run stuff in older contexts without having to yeah, just I feel like importing to older platforms is eased a little bit. I mean, you can cross compile and you can build modern GCC or whatever for other and obscure platforms, but that's like one extra piece in the puzzle and one extra, you know, potential point of friction. And I just kind of like the idea of firing up like an ancient C compiler and trying to get my game running in that. But as I've progressed, there's been a bunch of sort of core functionality that is valuable to me. That's C++, and I think I was like, okay, well, yeah, I'm not very good at remembering which numbers align with which versions and things, but I think is it C++ 90 or is it C98 or C++ 98? I can never remember which is which, but that's what I was kind of aiming for originally. And then as part of this I/O work, I ended up pulling in some C++ 11 features that are probably going to set my minimum there, as disappointing as that is. And here I am going back on what I said before, just for the convenience of not having to write implementations for a whole bunch of the sort of common functionality things. Oh, okay. Let me turn that down. I got my speakers down quite low, so I can't really hear. Let me just make sure I can afford to be a lot lower than that. Hey, let's just pull that down. Here's my rhythm box. You can see my rhythm box. Up a little, down a little. As it stops playing. Yes, we reached the end. Right, let's go back to this loud one. Go into the middle. No, so go back to this one. My goodness. All right, I think that's a bit better. Sorry. What was I? Yeah, we have a fairly large dynamic range on most of these. Particularly that intro is gets pretty big. It's meant to feel a little bit overwhelming. Oh, we can't even hear it now? Alright, try that then. Although there's probably a small delay. I've probably turned it up and down a bunch in response. Yeah, so going back to this to-do list, there are a couple of things that sort of act as fairly extreme bottlenecks on things that I would like to do, and one of those is the I/O refactor. There's a config handler, and proper raycasting here ends up having a bunch of dependencies that you know, sort of change the... Whoa, that is not the right window. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah, so the I/O refactor is basically changing how I handle all of my file formats. So I'm gonna start with a bit of a recap of, excuse me, very itchy nose there. I'm gonna start with a bit of a recap of what the work that I'm working on has been leading towards. So this I/O refactor is all about creating a modular and hopefully robust data file handling system that can guarantee me some reasonable level of backwards compatibility without creating a lot of extra maintenance overhead for myself. Alright, let's come down a tiny bit. So previously the code that I had for loading like scenes and objects and stuff was was sort of placeholder code that my dad had written. Originally, this game and engine started as a 70 FPS project, and in the hopes of getting it all done in a week. He says 6 years later. I invited my dad to help out. So he wrote a little parser thingy that was just kind of opens up the file, reads the first two letters. If they match, you know, a particular value, then whatever follows will be read in as the data. And we can look a little bit at that later. And so that was just like a string of if statements. And I was like, after working on Full Throttle and Day of the Tentacle and seeing how they handled save versions, they kind of had instructions for unpacking every single save, like historic save format in the code base. So if there were changes to the save file, you just kind of wrote a new version and left the old version in, and then they're identified by a little header. And that was pretty neat because that was like a packed struct. So you know the space that each parameter in the save file needed was already allocated regardless of how much actual data was in the save file. So there's a bit of bloat there, but since that particular game or those games, that engine doesn't need to save like lots of data in the save files, you know, a packed struct is kind of the most appropriate option, and was a good fit for those projects. For Winter's Wake, since I have the condition of my data files need to be human readable and human editable, that kind of packed struct option was not really open to me. I wanted to do something that was capable of handling arbitrarily sized files. You know, you might have a scene with 100 states, or you might have a scene with one state. I don't want to put a maximum upper limit on how many states you can have, and I don't really want to allocate, you know, hundreds of states worth of space for scenes that just aren't using them, right? So first things first, I wanted to have a some kind of version number stored in the data file that I could read off and go, okay, well, what loader do we need to use for this? And then I wanted to have separate loaders which I mean, let's go to the code and have a look. I wrote a lengthy Patreon post about this in more detail, so I'm just going to kind of skim over it a little bit here. If you want to know more, then feel free to take a look. I have a couple of things here. We have, for each file type, there is a prop class or property class, which knows about its delimiter, terminator, whether or not it's a multi-line thing. So most things are single line, but stuff like descriptions, like text descriptions for objects and scenes, can be multi-line. So I need some indicator of whether or not the property can do that, because how we handle termination needs to be different. And then each one needs to implement a get property and export data. I should probably like rename that to import data or something to make it more consistent. Oh, sorry, get property is to like get the sort of key for the key value pair. I'm not even paying attention. So there's export data and read data are the two sort of read and write things. And it's a little bit clunky. You know, like I'm passing the input stream into read data so that and so the function that reads out isn't sort of like wholly encapsulated from the actual sort of file IO stuff. But that's kind of necessary at the moment, just because the way that multi-line stuff is handled. I need to be able to pull the next line out of the file without making everything too complex. And then export data just returns a string, so that back in where I do most of the file IO, I can sort of do any further manipulation and push that out into the file there. And so every single file type's property definition is very close to being the same, but they are in some cases a little bit different. So for objects and scenes, there's whether or not it's a state property. As I mentioned, scenes can have multiple states, but there are some properties that are not a property of a state. So things like the scene color and the scene name are things that are sort of static across all states. And just having like an indicator of whether or not that's the case allows me to, when we're reading data out and populating, you know, the object that we're passing in, we want to make sure that that, you know, it's going into that things are going into the right places and into the right states. So there we go, and then, yeah, it's all that kind of stuff. And then if we go in and actually look at one of these files, we have like game version object 01, which is like version 0.1. We can see here it's got a version number, and we'll actually do a comparison against that when later on, when it comes to loading the file, we actually look for that file version, and you know, whatever we find we'll end up using. For unversioned stuff, for legacy stuff, this 0.1 version will load that. So as part of doing all of this this dramatic restructuring of saving and loading, I've also been creating my legacy loader, which will change quite dramatically. But for now, this is all about making sure that everything that anybody has made with Icicle up to this point has the ability to be loaded into a current version of the engine, regardless. So there's a map here, and the key for the map is the sort of string property key for the key value pair in the file. This is like, it's kind of clunky, right? But what this means is that I don't have to do any double entry for this stuff. The property is only defined in one place, and one place only. If I want to add a new field, which we'll be doing a little bit later, so you'll see, all I got to do is add one of these lines and then implement that that class from before. So yeah, we get the property, and then we create a new instance of that property, we insert it into the map, and yeah, so we end up with a bunch of double entry for stuff, or double storage, I guess, so that each individual property knows what its delimiter and terminator is, and I could just like use pointers for that instead, and I probably will in a later refactor, but for now I'll just like make another copy of it. But what's a few strings here and there? It's not very big in terms of memory usage right now. And yeah, so when it comes to actually loading the file, we've got some things here that sort of say, well, how do we know which which one to use? We currently this is sort of hard coded, but in future versions, this will, I'll tidy this up and make it a bit more a bit less hard coded. But yeah, right now it's like I only have one loader, so regardless of what version it finds, it's still going to use the same one. But just that process of going through this find version function, which is just here, will run through the file and check for the version number, and then as we see here, and then when it comes to function names here are going to change as well. No. Again, like a lot of this file loading stuff, the original iteration of this was a rushed thing for a 7-day game jam. But yeah, so we loop through every line in the file. We ask the where's the delimiter? There it is. Yeah. So we loop through every line in the file. We grab what the try and find the delimiter in the line. If the delimiter exists, then we search that map that we looked at before for the for whatever comes before the delimiter, which is the key. And if that key is actually in there, then we'll load it and continue on. We just rip through them all like that. And so now, where previously all of this stuff, all the read data stuff, was in a whole bunch of change if statements back here. All of the exporting stuff was in another place, and there were like 3 places or something where all of this stuff was done, whereas now all of the bits and pieces for one property within a data file is just all centralized, which makes it heaps easier to manage and heaps easier to write. So yeah, that's where that's at the moment. And I got this working a couple of months ago, or sort of, got it wrapped up enough that that I felt like it was ready enough that I could move on and focus on other things and leave stuff like reworking this file version stuff for later. I like to, particularly when it comes to large functionality stuff, I like to get things as close to functional as possible, and then give attention to other things that I've been ignoring, rather than try and come up with like the most perfect implementation the first time. Programming in my mind is so much of it is iterative, and again, giving myself time to think stuff through. If I stop, then I can reflect on what I think are the friction points and what I think are the problems and what I think are the hurdles along the way while I'm doing other stuff. And then when I come back to it, I can be more I can approach all of that more consciously and with more deliberateness. So when I exhibited this at PAX Australia, well, hang on, before we get there. So I mentioned that a couple of months ago, or a few months ago, or some point earlier this year, I think. I don't know. I have a very weird relationship with time right now. I got this sort of file IO stuff to more or less where I wanted it before I felt like I could move on to other things. And I was like, okay, that's great. And then I ran some tests, and I was like, oh no, there's like during scene transitions, which is when all the file loading happens, there's like a pop that occurs in the music in the few instances where music plays over scene transitions. It's not something that normally happens, but it's something that that I do for effect in Winter's Wake, and want to make available to other people who might be using the engine in the future. So that was a cause for concern, and I really didn't have a good lead on what might be causing that. I was like, okay, well all of the actual reading code is all the same. The only thing that's different is that I've replaced like a chain of ifs with a map, and that's always going to be slow, right? It's always going to be slower, and for 2 reasons. One, a map is a heavy object. It does a lot of internal. I don't know. I'm like, if you're a programmer, you're familiar with what a map does on the inside. If you're not a programmer, you're probably not going to be that interested. But it does like a bunch of fiddling to make sure that things are in certain kinds of orders to make them easier to access or easier to write. But they're not going to be as efficient as just like a couple of if-else statements or a switch statement, which the compiler itself will optimize into something that compiler does its own optimization. and it's probably turning that into something much more fancy than I can imagine. Compiler does a lot of stuff under the hood. It's possible that the hard-coded strings get turned into something else, some kind of hash maybe, and then the comparison is sort of optimized into some kind of other, the runtime value gets converted into something else to make the comparison faster. I don't know. I have not really considered or looked at it. But anyway, I was like, okay, so the map is really the only difference. So I'll take the map out of the equation. I'll load all of the data in first, and then I will create a queue of pending audio files that haven't been loaded. Well, actually, hang on. My debugging process was a little bit more convoluted than that. First thing I did was like, right, okay, what is causing this problem? Let's just comment out things. Let's load less. Let's try and do less and see if that has an impact. And by doing all of that, I was able to ascertain that the stutter only, or the gaps in the music, the pauses, only occurred during the actual loading of the sound, and all of this is like happening in a tiny number of milliseconds, which is beyond my brain's ability to sync up what I can see with what I can hear. So the timing of things is very difficult to work out. I can throw a few prints in, but as far as I'm aware, SDL Mixer sort of runs the audio on another thread anyway, so it's not guaranteed to be like that level of sync, and print statements are probably not going to tell me exactly what I need to know about the status of things. But in the end, I sort of ascertained that if I commented out the actual loading of the audio files, then the stutter didn't happen. The stutter is in a music file, so there's like music and sound effects are two separate things, so it's able to separate those out and identify that was what was going on there. And I'm like, okay, well, the only thing that's actually changed, we're still using the same loading code for actually loading the audio, the bit that seems to be causing the stutter. What if I just separate the loading of the file, the data file, from the loading of the audio, and I set up a little queue that I put all the audio file paths into, and then after loading the scene data, then once a frame it'll load a new, or once a tick it'll load the next piece of unloaded audio or not loaded audio. But then that still caused a stutter, and I'm like, well, that's taken the map out of the equation, and doing some very sort of quick and dirty printf debugging, I could tell that that as far as SDL ticks was concerned, the amount of time it took to work through the map and load everything through the new IO system was kind of taking less than a millisecond, maybe 2 milliseconds for larger files, and all the slowness was coming during audio file loading, but that's still only 2-3 milliseconds per file anyway, so difficult to work out what's going on there. While talking it through with a friend and just kind of trying to think through everything that had happened and trying to understand what's going on, I had said offhandedly that, this would be a lot easier to debug if it turned out that it was a buffer underrun or something. And at that point I was like, so how big is the buffer? And I found that increasing the SDL Mixer's buffer size made that problem go away, and in turn created some other problems. But yeah, I don't feel like I have a solid understanding of what's caused the problem, but providing that this makes it behave on all of the machines that I can test on here, I'm gonna just treat that as a fix, and the actual problem as a mystery to solve later, rather than something to gobble up my time right now. Just looking back through chat here, I see that there is some questions about Go. I have not messed with Go at all. I think I've seen some Go. I probably would recognize the syntax, but I don't have any real way of looking at that, or any real opinions. Sorry, is what I'm saying. A little bit of Go discussion. Yeah, I also Dragoy. I also am very Allman oriented for the way that I read and parse code, and maybe this comes from not using IDEs and not caring about having access to symbols for jumping around. But when I'm skimming code, the mostly blank lines that opening and closing braces represent are much easier and faster to parse. The shape of a closing parenthesis on the end of a line is visually distinct from a semicolon, it's visually distinct from an opening brace, it's visually distinct from a closing brace. This kind of structure makes it easier for my brain to kind of instantaneously parse what's going on without me having to stop and think about it. And the same for the way that I use indentation as well. The nice thing about a semicolon is that it cannot really be confused visually with anything else. A lowercase t kind of occupies the same space a little bit, but a semicolon has enough white space around it that's not really a risk. And yeah, I just really dig having my braces on new lines. It just makes everything a lot easier for me to spot while just scrolling quickly or trying to scan quickly code to understand and see what its structure is doing. And the same with, like, if I've got an opening brace at the end of opening parenthesis on the end of a line, that as well is kind of visually distinct, although not so visually distinct from an opening brace. These things kind of become easier to read. You'll find that most of my if statements have spaces after if, because it's a lot easier to see. Same with for statements. Sometimes I forget. Spaces between operators makes everything just a little bit easier for me to see and parse. But yeah, I am deeply frustrated when I don't have access to control over braces and white space in the same way. Yeah, Abel, you're totally right. In terms of approaching things using scientific method, allows you to have a degree of confidence in what you're doing, right? One of the, coming back to this to-do list, to one of the other things that I was going to be mentioning, prior to starting on this IO refactor, the largest work item that I had been working on was like a proper raycasting implementation. So when I first worked on this, when I first started working on this game, it was intended for a game jam. I wanted to get things up and running quickly. This is my strategy for things outside of game jams as well. I want to reduce the number of unknowns and uncertainties that I can potentially waste my time on at the beginning of a project. So when I started this, for any of you who've played an Icicle game, you will know that it's a little bit unconventional and it's kind of difficult to describe, but once you play it, you kind of get it. When I started working on it, I couldn't play it. I didn't know if it was going to work. It was a huge amount of uncertainty. And so rather than getting bogged down in writing a proper raycaster and writing robust file handlers and whatever else, I'm like, let's get the core functionality up as quickly as possible, and then I can make decisions about what's working, what's not working, and where to go from here. So my initial raycasting implementation was to ask for the last frame back from the graphics card, and find, because the way, let's fire up the game. I'll talk very briefly about how the hang on, let's run that in debug mode, which it'll now save to the save file, to the config file, which is frustrating to me. Okay, so anyone who's seen the game, this looks familiar. This is, you look around a space, you look at things, the background changes, it gives you some text descriptions. What may not be immediately obvious is that there is actually a 3D world here that you can't see. Anybody who's used the engine will know that, but may not be obvious to anyone who's just played the game. And so what I'm doing is I'm basically working out what the player is facing and then giving you a text description of that. And this entire scene that you can see here is actually sent to the graphics card, and then I tell the graphics card to create a 1x1 bitmap of a particular region of the space, which is actually like a square in the middle, and that's what gives you the background tinting, which is like nice and fast, right? So what I also do is I ask for the full version, like rendered version of that buffer that I squeeze down into a 1x1 bitmap. I ask for that back from the graphics card, and then I say, what color is the middle pixel? And since everything is uniquely colored, that's how I know what you're looking at. And I used that color as a index into a map that contained all of the objects. And in terms of getting the engine up and behaving fast, in terms of getting to a point where I could make informed decisions about what the engine needed to do and what it needed to be, that allowed me to get where I needed to be in like the span of a few hours versus the proper raycasting implementation. Although I worked on it on and off alongside other things and contract work and stuff, it took months, right? I have a tiny maths brain, and it took me a lot of time to work that out, which it didn't make sense to invest that amount of time when I didn't know whether or not the project was solid enough to work. I didn't know whether the concept would translate into an interesting reality, and in some senses it didn't. Originally, I wanted to have typical game assets in here. I wanted to make the level of sort of detail of the models and stuff that you might find in something like Firewatch, I guess. You know, in terms of detail density. This is what I had envisaged. I thought that it might be interesting if you kind of can trace the contour of things. Like maybe there's mountains in the distance and you can go, oh yeah, that's a mountain shape, that's interesting. Or maybe there's this tree here, you're like, oh yeah, okay, trunk and then branches and then leaves, and you know, I thought that would be something that would make this process of exploring a space without being able to see the space a little bit more technical and a little bit more just engaging. But what happens is you go say you're on the trunk and you're like, okay, there's a tree here, and you go off the trunk and you go, okay, we're not looking at the tree anymore, and you go onto a branch and you go, okay, there's two trees here, and it's just like fundamentally confusing and does not communicate the kind of things I wanted to communicate. So there's an example of how you can have a concept that sounds good in theory, but the moment that you implement it and have a bit of a go with it, you discover that it doesn't really do what you wanted it to do. And so, you know, there is a lot of, again, game development and programming and just design in general is an iterative process, and it's important to give yourself space to learn things about what it is that you're making along the way. Oh, okay, it's Control J when debug mode is enabled. Control H will toggle head tracking if a HMD that the game supports is detected. Control G will toggle mouse grab, which is kind of handy sometimes. And, oh no, Control H toggles HMD rendering, I think, but I've built it. No, Control H is yeah, let's pop that down there. and this up here. Control H is HMD input. Control G is mouse grab. One of these things around here. Control U? No, I don't know what it is. One of these should toggle. Well, Control F is full screen, but I think it's just F. Yeah. Maybe it's disabled because I have. Yeah, I compiled this with HMD support disabled, so I don't think it's gonna do it. I thought it was. I'm gonna look. It's been so long since I messed with any of the VR stuff in the game, so let's go to our input manager. And we'll look for HMD input. HMD rendering. Okay, it's just H as opposed to Control H. I know what I'm doing. There we go. All right, so we get stereoscopic rendering if you just press H. Okay. So part of the Raycasting implementation changes were that I changed how I work the generate the text, because the text ends up being an image. It's like text that's rendered to a picture, and then we show the picture on screen, because the graphics card doesn't know anything about fonts or text at all, so you kind of have to render that onto a surface and then draw that. But when we go to HMD mode, the size that we need to render things at changes, but then when we come back to normal mode, it's still got like the lower res text there until we look off and back on again. It's interesting. I'll have to like mark that as dirty at some point. Yeah, I mean, as far as technical debt goes, coming back to what Samsai said here, that it's easy to pick up technical debt when you're in a game jam, because you're iterating over stuff. I feel like you've got to do that anyway, right? And usually in sort of a traditional game development context, you try and do all of that in pre-production, or a large amount of that as far as your core tech goes. You try and do that in pre-production, in terms of doing that exploration of the kind of things like, does this work at all? Is it worth pursuing? So that when you go into production, you can do that with a degree of confidence that you're expending resources on something that you want to expend resources on. But even throughout production, I still find that it's worth doing things that you expect will not be final implementations and doing things that you expect to replace, because you will still have opportunities to learn things and discover things along the way that you didn't know and didn't have any way to know at the beginning. I don't feel like that's technical debt if it's something that you've done with the with the expectation of replacing it, right? If you've made something with the intention of it not being final, then it's not the same kind of technical debt where you go, oh man, I spent many hours on this and now it's useless. You go, I needed to spend many hours on this so that I could gain the knowledge and understanding and perspective in order to replace it with something better. That's kind of how I work. Yeah, that stuff, VR stuff was there long before I made any builds available to other people. Right. Game jams do encourage you to not to avoid any unnecessary iteration and encourage you to sort of overlook rough edges that you might otherwise want to deal with. And so this project hasn't suffered so much from that, but Hive Time definitely, because I tried to make that on a very fast time schedule. There are a lot of core decisions that I didn't feel comfortable investing time in changing, that weren't decisions that I would have made if I was making it in a proper dev cycle. Where I was making a project from scratch and sort of making a project with long view decisions, because at the time that we did the jam, Hive Time was not intended to be a larger project. It was something that we were just going to do 10 days for fun. Yeah, and you're right in terms of game jams don't give you a lot of time to design the architecture of your work, and generally there you're beholden to whatever experience you have, and whatever decisions that experience lets you make intuitively about your architecture and your just general design structure. And those not having that foundation can definitely lead to having discontent with the decisions that you end up making. I totally agree with that, and have experienced that. My little friends out there eating them seeds. I hope they're yummy seeds. For anybody who was watching last time I streamed, my little friend had learned to fly by the end of the day, and I didn't have to go and catch it at night and put it in a box to keep it warm. But I did run out with a torch anyway, just to sort of double check that that it was okay and wasn't in need of protection. But it was a fun adventure. So this raycasting thing, it was super cool to be able to have a solution that I could implement in a couple of hours and go, yes, I will replace this later. I know that I'm going to be replacing it later. I don't feel bad about that. And all of the things that interact with that particular part of the code are I can design in a way that won't be affected when that does get replaced. And that's kind of fun. So I was mentioning the raycasting implementation as the previous work item that I did that was quite large, and we talked about scientific method. This is the train of thought that I'm still following. If we so conceptually, raycasting is you have a line that represents the point that you are looking from, and then infinitely out along the direction that you are looking to, if that makes sense. And then you have two more points, which are the vertices and edges of your polygon. So you got to do that 3 times. But basically what you need to work out is, does your line intersect the line between these 2 points? Or is it to the left of it, or is it to the right of it, in whatever arbitrary space you want to work out? And then that you can kind of boil down to, some human scale geometry. It's not like magic anymore. And then you do that 3 times for each pairing of vertices. And depending upon whether you wind that clockwise or counterclockwise, will kind of eventually tell you whether or not the ray intersects the polygon itself, or whether it passes outside of it. And conceptually, that kind of makes sense. It's fine. But the actual details of the maths behind it is not what I'm good at. So I spent a lot of time. So I could have just copied and pasted stuff, and in the end I did use some references to guide me through how to approach this. But I wanted to make sure that I had a good understanding of what was involved, so that I wasn't writing code that I didn't, I don't like to write code if I don't know what it does, right? I suppose if I write some code and I'm like, I have no idea why this works, but I've written it off the top of my head, and I had intent when I wrote it, that's a different kind of situation. But if I'm just copying something out of an example, I don't feel like I've learned anything, and I want to make sure that, particularly because I'm the solo developer of this engine, and if there are any problems, I'm the one that's got to fix them. So knowing how it works is super important to me. So I wanted to. That's one of the reasons why it took a long time to work out. But there are a couple of steps. So we worked out the sort of geometry aspect, which is, that's fine. We then need to translate it, which means we add to the coordinates of every vertex the distance that it is from the camera, because it's positioned out in the world. We need to add to the X, Y, and Z coordinates, where actually it is, and that's fine. It's easy. All you do is just add some numbers, but then you also need to rotate it, and that's where things get a little bit complex. No worries, Samsai. Thanks for dropping by. It has been good to chat, and I will catch you another time. Yeah. So when it comes to rotating, depending upon what kind of coordinate space you're using, whether Z is away from the camera or Z is up and down, whether negative Z is away from the camera or positive Z is away from the camera, or negative X is this way or negative X is that way. There are a whole bunch of different combinations, and you need to use a different combination of sine and cosine and whatever else in order to do that, right? If that makes sense. There are a bunch of different combinations of how you can align your the way that you can have your coordinate space set up, and then in turn there are a bunch of different ways that you can rotate stuff that are dependent on which coordinate space you're using. And my tiny maths brain just could not work out exactly which ones to use. So coming back to scientific method, I went, okay, well, I know that there's only like 20, 24, 23 cases, 23 different combinations. It's faster for me to just write them out and look at which one is correct than it is to spend all my time thinking about it. And because I understand the principles, I understand what needs to be done. I'm just not good at intuiting. And as a programmer, that's a handicap to a degree. But I also like to think that as a programmer, my job is to make the computers do the maths for me. So this is totally in line with that. But yeah, this is an example of just kind of how thinking about your problem from a perspective where you have like a methodological approach, where you have a structured approach to sort of identifying the bounds of a problem, and then identifying the cause, and then identifying the sort of solution. You can approach that in a bunch of different ways. You can approach that from the perspective of having lots of knowledge. You can approach that from the perspective of having lots of just analytical ability, and you can approach that from a perspective of how do I use the tools that I have available to me to just simplify the problem at hand. And I think that a combination of all three is very much a part of what programming is and what problem solving in general is. That you make use of your knowledge, you make use of your thinking powers, and then you also make use of whatever tools you have available. And I feel like that's a fun example. It's a little bit embarrassing, but I'm happy to take some embarrassment if that shed some light on how you can approach and think about and solve problems that might make other people feel more reassured about how they do things and how they approach things. So, yeah. Right. So, coming back to something that I had started to talk about earlier, I exhibited this game at PAX Australia, and I have not shipped builds of any of my Icicle games since then, which is good from the perspective of this. Let me just get rid of that print because we don't need it. This is the menu music for Winter's Wake, is hard coded in here. Because I hadn't written my new I/O system, I didn't want to go through the process of adding another config element or config property, because, as I mentioned before, that was spread across a bunch of places. I would have had to have A, written that, and then B, removed and rewritten all of that as part of this big I/O refactor. So, quick and dirty, it's just faster to to put that in, to hard code that there. Now that I've got this new fancy I/O system, if I go into my game config, I have just last night I added a new property, which is for getting menu music, which I've copied and pasted there, and not. If we go back up to here, I can see that there's nothing to it. Like, it's pretty simple. But the extra maintenance cost, and see, that would have been like a small piece of technical debt that I would be less comfortable with, which we're talking about technical debt earlier. Yeah. On the topic of VR stuff, while I remember and glance across the chat, VR support has sort of been in there since day one, pretty much. Yeah, that's it. The original concept was, what would a VR-friendly text adventure look like? That's how I arrived. That's the prompt that led me to the prompt that I gave myself that led me to this kind of experience and this kind of thing. I don't think it's the only way that you could do it, but yeah, that's been in there from the very beginning. Unfortunately, the direction of VR in general has shifted since that time. And I don't really know what Icicle's VR support will look like at the end. And that's immensely frustrating to me, and I could go on another sort of... could waste another hour ranting about that. But yeah, I don't know. See, it used to be that it looked like this generation of VR, this era of VR was going to be dominated by standard devices. The accelerometers in the... So let's... considering that the Oculus Rift was the sort of catalyst for breaking open this current era of VR, its original concept was the accelerometers, the head tracking, is just presented as a standard 2-axis HID, human interface device. You plug it in via USB, anything will read it. The screen was just a standard HDMI screen that you used a shader on to do the appropriate distortion, but it presented itself as a normal screen, a normal monitor, standard device. Don't need highly complex drivers or APIs to use them. And in my opinion, complex SDKs were one of the big hurdles of the sort of previous VR push in the sort of late 80s, early 90s. Not only were dev kits just insanely expensive, but implementing stuff was a lot of work. Whereas when things present as sort of standard devices, the complexity of implementation goes down a lot. Now, I can see and acknowledge that what has become dominant in the current era of VR, with its focus on direct rendering, is better for low latency experiences and better for high fidelity experiences, but in my opinion that is the wrong direction to go in, and I feel like it's excluded a lot of people from being able to make VR stuff. This engine runs on my Raspberry Pi. I can plug my Oculus Rift DK1 into my Raspberry Pi. I can compile OpenHMD on my Raspberry Pi. I can run this game in VR on my Raspberry Pi. The power and accessibility that having standard devices gives you is that I didn't need the highly complex Oculus SDK in order to make that stuff run on whatever I want it to run on, right? And I wasn't necessarily dependent on vendor support because the vendor was more or less using standard devices. Whereas the reality that we transitioned into was that they moved to adopt the style of core tech that Valve used or had been working on for for their stuff. It's a funny quote from a Valve employee who says that Oculus was technically the first licensee of their HMD tech, but history will remember it very differently. But yeah, the moment that they did that, Oculus dropped Linux support, and the ability to just plug stuff in and have it work went away. It doesn't help that the video graphics driver vendors have sort of bought into this as well, and like I can't plug a HDMI HMD into my graphics card without my graphics drivers turning it off, because it's expecting that everything is just going to be doing direct rendering. And in terms of, I mean, like, that's just not what this engine does. So I now have to either have a style of, you can work around that and you can kind of turn it on. But in terms of the user experience that I would be giving people, I'm like, okay, well, you got to go into your drivers and mess with a bunch of settings, and potentially, in some cases you might need to restart your machine before you can do this. And it's like the process of getting things set up is just an enormously unpleasant overhead to be asking my users to have. And I really don't know right now whether I'm going to have to do that. Maybe I can, it's like, how much time do I want to invest in writing direct rendering support? Yeah, like I just have shortcuts that go, you press Control Tab and the game will move to the next monitor, and you just press that until it's in your HMD, and that's like not hard. It's pretty easy. And if you have a HMD that I don't know about, that means that you can do that. Whereas at the moment, I would need to go, like audio static, audio noise. Let's have a look. Maybe it's a piece of music. Let me just turn off the... Oh yeah, something got... Oh, it's not static. It's just the sound of leaves rustling and stuff in the game. All right. You can keep doing your thing. Yeah, it was the game running in the background. Where was I? I was still ranting about VR. Yeah, so like I can go, all right. If you're running an Oculus Rift, or you're running a Valve Index, or you're running a HTC Vive, then I can detect that those devices exist, and I can tell the game to render on those devices if I implement a direct rendering, if I do a direct rendering implementation. But if you have a device that I don't know about, then that's going to be a lot harder for me. Like, I potentially will not be able to detect that. Whereas if every HMD just allowed you to have itself presented as a monitor that you just put a window on and draw stuff to, then I can support everything without me having to invest without me having to know about stuff that potentially doesn't even exist. It just makes me so angry, because the fidelity oriented changes that the push for lower latency and higher resolutions and all of that led to this different kind of focus means that the devices cost more and are less accessible to people. I'm in my mind, the ideal future is that if someone has a HDMI port and a USB port in their toaster, and they're excited about doing VR, then being able to do that means that there are more people who have the ability to do stuff. Whereas now, if you want to do VR dev and you're not hugely experienced, you pretty much, like maybe you're a developer with my level of technical knowledge, for example, or less. The ability to explore VR by just hacking around on your Raspberry Pi or hacking around on like some 20-year-old laptop or whatever, without having to have like a new high-powered machine, means that more people can make stuff. Making it so that you have like no dependence on complex SDKs means that more people can do stuff. At the moment, if you want to do VR development, you kind of have to use a third-party engine like Unity or Unreal or Godot or whatever, because they've done all the complex stuff for you. But they carry with them a huge amount of bloat and learning curve and whatever. If you just want to push triangles to a window, that's a very different level of expertise that you need, and a very different level of learning investment that you need to have in order to feel like you can make something. And I'm much, much, much more interested in what people who are outside of the conventional game development sphere are likely to make. People in less economically advantaged countries and regions and demographics have, my imagined future was that that those people could create interesting experiences in a way that would be empowering and accessible for them as developers, but also in terms of creating opportunities for representation much more powerful than the kind of situation that we have come up with now. But instead, the industry and pretty much every vendor involved has bought into this consumer-ready VR myth, the narrative that, perfect VR is just around the corner, which is ultimately harmful, right? Because it's not. And it never will be. At least, probably not within my lifetime. I don't know. Like, if we use the evolution of 3D as a comparison, which again I look at and I see a lot of problems with broad accessibility, and I see a lot of problems with people chasing fidelity specifically. You know, like the shifts in the industry that happened in the mid 90s onwards, about what constitutes valuable experiences, what's marketed as valuable experiences, and what's marketed as like progress, is only fidelity, right? Like it's only graphical fidelity. And if we look historically, anything that was touted as good and amazing and like the best thing ever and photorealistic or whatever, you know, was outdated in 6 months to a year anyway. And technical development for VR is going to do the same. You know, in another 5 years, there's going to be another slew of devices that is beyond anything that that we have right now. And instead of telling everybody, oh yeah, we're just kind of, it's right around this, the sort of singularity of everything being perfect is just around the corner, and then to ship something that is a little bit beyond what is appropriate for the market at the time, just that's going to be a narrative that dominates VR moving forward, and it's something that I think people are going to get tired of very quickly because they hear it again and again and again. Is this idea, oh, you know, consumer VR is just around the corner and this magic new device is it. And then in 6 months' time, the same narrative will be happening again, and in 6 months' time, the same narrative will be happening again. The bulk of people who are uncertain will be sitting off to the sidelines going, okay, well, we'll just wait until that next one. There's always going to be another thing. And it's not a case of, you know, we get halfway there and then we make it the equivalent jump that gets us halfway again. You're always like kind of jumping half of the distance, and there's sort of this infinite precision that will never happen, right? I feel like 10 to 15 years of this, let's push down the standard device road, would have been culturally far healthier than, you know, and then transition to, you know, slightly more complex things, or the kind of stuff that's dominating now. That would have given a lot of space for people to explore what VR is and what VR can be without all of those accessibility problems that I was talking about earlier. And, you know, in addition to less opportunity for representation, less opportunity for broader representation, less opportunity for broader exploration is sort of a deeply disappointing reality that I think we're in. And, you know, it saps my motivation to work on VR stuff at all, to be honest. Dear. All right. Anyway, where were we? Right. We're like an hour and a half in, and I'm about to make a start. Good times. Yeah. So, what I'm in the process of doing, or was in the process of doing last night, was adding this extra property, this game menu music property, so that we can load the game menu music from the game config file and remove this hard-coded value here. Hey Nevik, how you doing? You're just in time for me to make a start and not be ranting about unrelated stuff. Well, thanks, Drago. I'm glad that I had a willing audience for that. I noticed that my viewer count had dropped significantly while I was waffling on about the shape of the industry. Right, so oh, thanks, Tori. This application doesn't even have a dark mode, Nevik. There's no light mode, it's just the application. Yeah, so I now need to make sure that this isn't going to happen here anymore. Let's just comment that out for now. I'm gonna have to run through and look for all my PAX notes because there are a couple of other things that I've changed as well that we might have a bit of a look into today. I also want to remove these hard-coded things here. Yeah, Dragway mostly hangs out in the IRC channel that I've got for Icicle, which is Icicle-engine or #Icicle-engine on freenode.net. If anybody wants to drop by, there's not really much activity going on there, but yeah, I wouldn't mind doing another Icicle jam after I've done all this stuff and have a chance to tweak some editor stuff. Dreamweaver. Wow. Now there's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Game config. Alright, so here's where we load the game config. Oh yeah, right. Sorry, my brain is still in old mode. I don't need to do anything here. What I need to do is back here. Excuse me. Well, no, maybe I do. So let's just go and search for menu sound path, and I'll just do the same thing that I'm doing there. Where are we? Oh, that's another thing that Genie has that gedit didn't, which is the ability to find in files, I think. Oh, they paid a lot of money for it, right? Isn't it funny how much Macromedia properties dominated Adobe's identity for a long period of time, but now does not? Because I'm pretty sure Dreamweaver was Macromedia. Yeah. Because Macromedia was like super web focused, whereas at the time Adobe was mostly like graphic design focused, which they still are, right? Yeah, so back here in the resource manager here, where is this? This is load fonts, load audio effects. We'll just make a new load music function. Well, no, we'll do it here in load audio effects, and I will use this here is gonna be another thing that we change today as well. Yeah. If menu music path not equals whatever, menu music equals load music music sound path, which I think I have not added. Music sound path. It's menu sound path. Dear. All right, there we go. Yeah, I mean it. Even though it had been rebranded, it's still difficult for me to not see it as a Macromedia property. Because they acquired like the entirety of Macromedia, right? Because Flash was Macromedia as well. Yeah, it was purchased by its rival Adobe. 2005. Wow, I thought it was a lot earlier than that. Jeez. Yeah, still feel like the world would be a better place if corporations couldn't buy other corporations. Like, if it was illegal for a business entity to acquire another business entity, just dissolve them and transfer, sell stuff, I guess. You know, do it as a separate thing rather than something where you can feel like you can have continuity. Yeah, I haven't run another jam. I would like to. I want to finish this work that I'm in the middle of. I want to do some more editor stuff before I run another jam. But obviously, because my situation has changed so dramatically recently, I really don't know how my work is going to be structured. Moving forward, it's difficult to predict how and where things are going to go. Yeah. Yeah. It's tricky. It's tricky. Yeah, alright, so we're doing that. Let me just double check that load music does what I want it to do. Yes, it does. Good. That is fine. So there it is. I think I should also have a if menu music is null. We do a lot of null comparisons. It's fine. Let's log. These should also. So this is a. This should just be a warning. Mix get error. I think it is. Mix get error. No. Get error with a capital G. Okay, there we go. Oh, Hatcher? I'll probably make Hatcher and Godot. Yeah, so let's just, I'm not gonna, unable to load music. Menu music. Oh, actually, no, this is an error. I'll clean up these and make these like fancy, you know, Icicle style error things. Why do we do this in here? Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Right. We do this in here because we're just going to play the menu sound as a fallback if no other sounds existed. Yeah. Yeah, people do like the... Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a small thing, but you know, it people respond to it. It's something that people want to share and talk about. So from a marketing perspective, it's really valuable. But from a personal perspective, it makes me happy, and that's really positive in terms of maintaining morale and motivation and whatever. You know, there's this thing, right? So you're a person with at least a small amount of programming experience, and I think a few of the other people watching are as well. But so here's a question for you: when you write an application that says "Hello World," is that you saying hello to the world through your application, or is that you programming your application to say hello to the world? So is that is that hello world coming from you, or is it coming from the application? And this boils down to the perspective of, is your application an entity in and of itself? And if it does, then it must have some characteristics. It must have some character. And for me, those error messages are the same kind of thing. They're me giving the engine the opportunity to express itself, I suppose. What does debug do? Debug enables the editor and some extra logging and stuff. But it is like an interesting thing, and I feel like it's not something that anybody ever is prompted to think about. You're just told, or you write your application and you write hello world in it, or you write whatever in it, and it's not something that anybody is encouraged to consider the meaning of. I have some vague recollection that that the person responsible for sort of establishing that as a convention, in their view, it was teaching the program to say hello to the world. Like, it's just been born and it can say, you know, it is now in the world and it is going to say hello to the world. I think that's kind of where it came from. But I think that probably the default for a lot of contemporary programmers or people who have gone through contemporary education, programming education, probably see it the other way, where it's a way, it's just, this is me saying, using my game as a megaphone, using my application as a megaphone, because I am entering a new world as a programmer. Like when I write hello world, I'm stepping into a new context as a developer. But yeah, it's an interesting philosophical thing. I certainly, of course, enjoy the idea of your application as an entity of its own that you imbue with behaviors and abilities. That resonates with me more. That's the kind of relationship I'd like to have. Blackbird's still hopping around. So it's interesting to see the relationships that blackbirds have with the feeder. Most blackbirds feed off the ground. They're looking for bugs and seeds and whatever on the ground. They'll dig a little bit. That's what they do. But a couple have learned that they can climb up onto the feeder and get some noms that way. And once they learn that, because they're bigger than the sparrows and in general less timid than the doves, they'll happily tell the other birds to go away so that they can continue eating. I don't think it's visible on the camera, but the blackbird just there found up against the fence there, just ate a worm. But you can see it digging. 2 worms. I love the way they hop along. They're not always very nice to each other, but I like them. Does Hatcher have anything to do with birds? Not specifically, but it would have birds in it. When I get to a point where I can start prototyping Hatcher, I will we'll probably talk about it. at some point. You know, I'll do a Q&A. Oh, you would like to make a bird watching game? That'd be sweet, man. Like that is a cool idea. So like maybe you're in a bird hide or something, or maybe you're on some kind of you know, wilderness walk or whatever, and maybe you click on a bird and it plays a little photo sound or something, and it adds a photo of that bird to your inventory, and then at the end you can like tally up your points. Man, that'd be sweet. I don't want to steal your idea, but I love that. You should do that. That is awesome. If you don't do it, I'm gonna do it. Yeah. I like. It'd be cool to have um, like some bird hides as well. I don't know if you know what a bird hide is, but that's a like a little structure where you can take photos and watch birds from where you're not visible. So you're hiding from the birds, but it's just like a little hut or something that's got some narrow windows. Yeah, it'd be sweet to like be able to move around different I don't know about like different biomes per se, but I think about there's an island on the river just over here. It's on the other side of the river, so it's a long trip for me. I probably won't be going there for a while. I have to get good at cycling again. But there's an island over there. It's called Tamar Island, and there's a Tamar Island Wetlands Reserve, and there's a boardwalk that goes across the wetlands, and it goes through like a bunch of different types of environments. So there's like a swampy bit, and there's like a grassland bit, and there's also this island which has a bunch of trees on it. So there's like some woodland bit, and different birds live in different parts of that. But it's all on one walk, and it's kind of nice and continuous in that sense. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a sweet idea. I am 1,000,000,000% down for playing that. I'd love that. So if you weren't aware, Icicle does allow you to give points for interactions. So like if you wanted to add some kind of point indicator for seeing, interacting with bird objects in the world, you could totally do that. And yeah, inventory is entirely cosmetic, so you could just like make it so that interacting with a bird added something relevant to your inventory. Could be fun to have some like other pickups, like maybe you find some feathers somewhere and stuff as well. It could be kind of fun. I dig it, man. That is sweet. That is a sweet idea. What are we doing? You want to ride your bicycle? Are you singing a Queen song, or do you actually want to ride your bike? Oh, that's me. I'm saying I want to ride my bicycle. I see. No, look, I used to cycle a lot before I hurt my hands. Yeah, I rode every day, and I commuted to work on my bike. But when I hurt my hands and arms, I couldn't really ride. Hey, Kisak, thanks for dropping by. I appreciate you swinging by. It's always nice to hear from you. I feel like we haven't talked a lot recently, and I would be very happy to catch up at some point if you want to have a chat. But give me a yell. You have trouble with the stopping part, like brakes, or you have trouble like not riding once you start. Yeah, I'm considering. Again, money is very difficult right now. But I'm considering taking my bike in and saying, "Hey, look, just stick disc brakes on this because I don't want to worry about caliper brakes anymore. Disc brakes last longer, they're more effective. They're a little bit heavier, which sucks, but whatever. But yeah, they're more reliable and more robust, so I think I'd like to do that. My first bike had back pedal brakes. So you like pedal backwards and it locks up the back tire. Oh yeah, so that's like not my chat thing. I contributed to it. But if you're interested, and it's possible that let's just take a quick look at the commit history, because I haven't I haven't used anything past my last commit. So yeah, this version that I'm using is over 3 years old, but there's been a bit more work since. So, but if you want to take a look at it, go nuts. I would like to have more time to do that, but it's not high on my priority list. Yeah. Where are we? Oh yeah, what does that look like? Oh yeah, yeah. That doesn't look quite right. At least it's, well, it doesn't even have a proper umlaut thing. Umlaut. Is it umlaut? Umlaut. Might be umlaut. And it doesn't have one of them. It's got like a, what's the squiggly one called? Some kind of other inflection mark. I don't know. Good times. Alright, where were we? So we now know that when load audio effects, let's just just to do double check function name loading more than sound effects now. I always thought it was umalat, but I don't think it is. Right, so we are populating this variable here. We know that this is called as part of setup. That is all good. I think that's all the work we need to do. So I can build it now, and I will have a listen. Yoink. And we'll see if the main menu music. Oh. 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 Huh? Huh. Oh, right. Okay. So that's an Icicle main. You want /t. Oh, that's the other thing. I can't use escape characters in here. I wanna search for menu music preceded by a tab, and I don't have. Yeah, there it is. Where else was it? Okay, it's just that. That's fine. And the mix getter, I'm just gonna leave that out for now. It's just because I'm not including the SDL mixer headers in this file, and we'll deal with that later. Oh my goodness! I don't want to become famous. You're getting reported, my dude. We gotta. Why can't I tick all of these? Right, like it's clearly a bot. It's clearly a scam, and it's most likely a malicious link. But I'm not going to click on it to find out. But we'll say it's a bot account. Trying to sell followers in chat. Imagine being the kind of scumbag that would, yeah, block that sucker. And also ban. How do I ban this? Why do they not, in the stream manager dashboard, why do they not expose the moderator tools here? It's freaking stupid. Show mod icons. Let's try that. Oh, there we go. And you get banned. Boom. Okay. But yeah, that stuff should be on by default. It's bonkers that it's not. All right, here we go. We're gonna run this. Hang on. Yeah, debug's in there. So let's get rid of debug because that changes how things are loaded. Well, not hearing any menu music. Oh, that's because I haven't put it in the config file. As we say, duh. So config file I usually have over here in a text editor. Source, and it's icicle.rc. No, it's game.rc, so that's going to be back up here in resources full. And we got menu sound is there. Let's just do menu music. And adventureflute.org is what it's going to be called. Save that, run that. Okay, we got an unable to load menu music. So what's that all about? Let's just so we do have the file. The file is there. Let's go back here and we'll see if we can work out what's going on. I guess we are going to need. Well, hang on. So back here in load music, which like we don't need this here, right? It should be in load music. Well, yeah, okay. Let's leave it there. And let's put that back, and let's just import the SDL mixer header. Or include import. That's not included here, is it? Yeah, where do we get mixed chunk from? Must come in from like game object or something. No, it doesn't matter. It's all good. Let's build that. Oh, don't do that. There we go. No worries. I'm gonna wrap up once we've got this confirmed as working. All right, now I'm confused. Here's mix get error, right? Yeah, it's mix get error. Why is that not working then? Let's double check the SDL mixer API. This is general. Get our. Yeah, that's it. Oh, it's not. The mix is not in all capitals. All right. So we probably don't need that there. Yeah, it's no. It's my own fault. The TTF get error is like the TTF is uppercase for STL TTF, which throws me off a little bit. But yeah, once we got this confirmed as working, I will wrap up. I was only planning to stream for a couple hours. I'm sorry that most of that went to boring rants and things and recaps rather than actual work, but okay, yeah, no, I'm just like grabbing the wrong thing. It should be menu music path. That's what I get for copying and pasting instead of typing things out. No, it's still doing it? What the hell? So it says here, it's like it's couldn't open because it's trying to load menu sound.org, which is not what menu music path should be. So how does menu music path become there we go. Menu music path. Menu sound path. Oh, this is confusing. Did I just put no? All right. Well, let's just let's just print out what we've got here. Oh, there is there like a clear error? Oh, now it hasn't. Now it hasn't. You know what I think is happening here? Okay, so I think maybe I just wasn't paying attention. Although, hang on, this should be resourceful icon. Where is that C out that we just put in from back here? Blind. So I can compile it. What's with the double slash? Where is that? Oh, that's just the path has a trailing slash on it, and it's appending a slash somewhere. That's valid. happens to everything. This is silly. Oh no, there it is. Okay, so it is being loaded as the thing that we're expecting. That's cool. What I suspect is happening, excuse me, is that this stuff is happening before the game data's loaded properly. That's easy enough to find out. Doop 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 doop. I should restructure how my build system works. Where is that? Loading menu music. Okay, so that's occurring after. All right. That's occurring after that, but maybe it's not occurring after this. So let's and this would be faster with the debugger, but no, like the thing is more that I'm always compiling everything rather than only compiling the thing that have changed. So I can change the build system so that I'm building objects for every file and then linking those together at the end, rather than building everything. That's the kind of build system optimization that I'm thinking of. And until I do that, changing the number of threads will not make a difference. Okay, there we go. All right, so we can see what's happening now. The order of things is that we're loading that out of the config file, and then we're actually processing the menu music, and then down here we're actually doing a business. So that now means that we made a whole bunch of prints that we didn't have. I already suspected that this was the case, but I felt like it was probably good to you know, just show this stuff. How do you work that out? How do you find that? How do you track it down? So I want to load audio effects. Where do we call that from? We call that here. Let's just well, so the question is, do I want to do this stuff before or after this? I think it makes sense to keep everything the way it is, but do the menu music after load audio effects. Oh, and let's just put that up to 100. Yeah, my build system's not particularly fancy. Yeah, I don't have like make targets for each each file. I just build them all in one go, right? Huh. I don't know why I'm doing that in 2 lines. I suppose I should probably break it up into a whole bunch of lines so that it's like easier to parse. And yeah, okay, so like all the file version stuff is now in its own line. That makes sense. All right, I know what I'm talking about. We did it! So it's no longer hard-coded. There is more work to do though. So I was talking about just free up the mouse there. Talking about the only place that I needed to add stuff is like here. This is all the code that handles the parsing and loading and saving of that value. That's not what I want to press. Hi, and thank. What I haven't done is made UI for adding it, and that's probably going to be the sort of next work item that I work on. Is just a bit of an overhaul of how the editor UI is generated, so that it uses these property definitions to generate this stuff, and handle just move all of the code from the editor stuff. It's like, yeah, so we've got like these update functions here which have a lot of like really specific behavior. Yeah, it's and all this stuff is kind of clunky as well. So I need to think about how to integrate this in a way where I have less hard-coded stuff like this, and more stuff that's like just generated from these existing definitions. Because I really would like to be able to just get to a point where I can type in a new property definition like this, and then that will result in, you know, because all this needs to do is create a label or a text thing with the property name. We've got the property name. We know what that's going to be, and add some kind of entry option, which I don't really have any kind of like type information, but that's easy enough to add. So yeah, I'll probably look at doing that, and also look at fixing up wrapping here. Yeah, there is actually a stream of me like making a project from scratch or making an Icicle engine game from scratch. Because I have got some videos of me making Icicle stuff. Yeah, gotta tweak that a little bit. Man. This is how the game looks at the moment. I don't know if the versions that you have this, but the angle between the scenes is now reflected, or reflects the position of the exit. So if I move that around and I go back to the scene editor, you can see that that's moved, and it goes to the point where you would enter. Or it should. Did I mess that up? Oh, I did. Okay. Oh yeah, no, sorry, no, that's correct. That's correct. So if you're leaving down this way, then when you enter, you're going to enter from this side. So it's like it's a way of communicating to you which directions you're going to be leaving and entering from. Yeah, so like I have video of me making a game in the Icicle engine. Let's Oh my goodness, I have no idea what I'm gonna do with the excuse me, with the Love Bees YouTube account. It's like it's just so much stuff. Don't play that. Where are we? Yeah, the Icicle 0 launch stream. These two streams are me making an Icicle thing from scratch. Sadly, they have a bunch of problems. Like the video has a bunch of problems with it, but yeah, good times. I think also the. Oh no, this is just me talking about stuff. Looking very green there. Go me. I should probably make just a Winter's Week playlist and a Hive Time playlist. I suppose. I don't know. I don't want to think about that stuff now. But yeah, as far as like just making a game from scratch, yeah, I don't have anything. I would like to feel confident enough to do that. When I've done talks, like when I used to run my local lug, I would do a talk on game dev every now and again, and I would make a project from scratch. And that was I would do that as part of the thing. So like Honeycomb Crunch, for example, I went through the process of making that from scratch during it was a 1.5 hour talk. Hoverdrive as well, Tiny Chopper Raceway as well. But in all three of those cases, I had already made the game first as preparation for that talk, so it wasn't really making it from scratch. It was making it from scratch with a large knowledge advantage. But yeah. So anyway, just to recap, we have implemented Game Music 01. We have removed this hard coding of some music stuff. We've restructured the load order so that actually works with how we've done the things. And then the remaining work on what we've been talking about is to add the editor thing, but rather than add the editor thing, I'm thinking of maybe using this as an opportunity to do some automated UI generation. So yeah, we'll see how that pans out. I might try and stream that stuff. I don't know, I'll have a think about it. But yeah, in the meantime, thanks for watching. Have a nice day. And I will try to do some more of this later. After I've done a couple of streams, I will probably have fewer rants. Fewer rants and fewer recaps in me. So I'll be able to sort of dig in and do things quicker. Also, I totally did not notice that Toasty joined. Thank you for dropping by, dude. And Lumi's still here as well. Wow, I'm just not paying attention to chat, right? Thanks, guys, for and girls for dropping by. It's nice to see you, and yeah, I'm gonna try and do this more regularly. I'm a lot slower when I work on stream, but I want to kind of try and build up some sense of momentum as I get closer to doing new builds of my Icicle games. So ideally, if everything goes well, that could be this month. But I also want to spend some time on Hive Time stuff so that I can try and release a patch coinciding with Hive Time's 1 year Hiveversary. But we'll see how that goes. But yeah, anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you later.